If you're looking for a new way to support Side Mission, check out Dubby.gg, an energy supplement company trying to make a difference. Make sure to use code SIDEMISSION for 15% off your order. Thank you, Dubby, for sponsoring this episode, and we hope you enjoy.
Welcome into the newest episode of Side Mission. I, like always, am your host, Rusty Ellis, joined by the boys, Kyle and Matt. And today, we're reviewing episode 2 of Twisted Metal. And we really enjoy it, I think, for the most part, fellas. Episode 1 did a really good job of kind of laying the groundwork. There were definitely some things that could have been better, I think we all agreed on. There were some things to talk about, such as Anthony Mackie and, just seeing this kind of a role from him compared to the MCU. But I think we can all agree. I think that episode 2 does a good job of moving things forward. There's a lot more action. I think the humor's a lot better in this episode as a whole. And I think there's a lot of things that work really, really well in this episode moving forward in the season. You two have obviously already watched all the way to the end. I've not, so...
Guilty, I'm still on episode 8.
you for jumping that far ahead. But the most important thing, or the big thing that really jumps out, literally so, we get to finally meet Sweet Tooth. And I say finally like we're not in episode 2 and we're in like episode 9, but we get to meet Sweet Tooth finally, portrayed by Samoa Joe, voiced by Will Arnett. And we just got done talking about it, guys. Kyle, we'll start with you, and then Matt, I'll get your opinion on it after he's done. Really, really good job by the production team for it to not feel disjointed at all, that one person is portraying Sweet Tooth and another is voicing. Kyle, I thought that was really well done. And Will Arnett kills it as Sweet Tooth.
Yeah, I gotta say, when I first saw that Will Arnett was gonna be Sweet Tooth, I was a little skeptical because he doesn't really have the body for him. But then we obviously saw later on when the first teaser for it came out, it clearly was not Will Arnett who was portraying him, and it came out that it was Samoa Joe. And then I was even more skeptical because I was like, okay, so this is going to be two different people. It's, I can't think of a lot of situations where that's been done very well. But they managed to pull it off. Like you said, it doesn't feel disjointed. They absolutely are editing Will Arnett's voice to make it a little bit deeper. But that's okay. I think that doing that makes it fit, because Will Arnett has a very distinct voice, and if they had just come in here, having him sound like Lego Batman, I wouldn't have been able to picture anybody but him. But because, it's a lot deeper, when I see Sweet Tooth, I hear that voice coming out, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I feel like it's actually him talking, the voice matches the body. And also, they did a good job of, giving him the full look from, the Twisted Metal games. Obviously, we got to see the big shootout scene when John Doe and Quiet are in the car, and he pulls up next to them and he goes, "You coming to my show?" And then he just starts shooting at them, and they have this big old gun battle that ends with them crashing through what looked like the front of a casino. But that whole scene was well choreographed. I really like the car battles in this show.
Yeah, they did a fantastic job with Sweet Tooth. As somebody who has been kind of an off and on again fan of the franchise, Sweet Tooth got nailed perfectly. Like the mannerisms, the voice of him, it's just everything that I pictured him to be, especially considering that the games don't really have like full blown cutscenes. So just seeing them how they perfectly nailed what I imagine Sweet Tooth to be like in a live action adaptation. He was very comical, and one thing that they absolutely noted that I loved was the fact that they're cartographers, the guys, the people who make the maps. I think I said that right. They tried to make the maps to avoid Las Vegas specifically because that is Sweet Tooth's domain. This is the guy that everybody's so afraid of, that they completely avoid Las Vegas. But he shows it though, like he's just so, what's the word? Like he's just he's so psychopathic, menacing. Yeah, exactly. Just
menacing is a great word. Yeah,
for a clown. Yeah, exactly. Because a lot of people have fear of clowns. So yeah, and just like the shootout that he did with John Doe, that was so cleverly done. And I think what I loved most about it is just was so random is when he pushed him up against the slot machine or whatever. He just starts freaking singing the thong song. I was like, bro, excuse me? And then John Doe starts singing along with him. He's like, he's just so surprised, and it stops him from killing him. I was like, okay, so apparently just know a song like from the thong song that was just so out of nowhere, but it fits the world, it fits the characters so well. And in most places, I would probably just like cringe from it, but it was just done so comically accurate, and I just loved what they did.
Yeah, I think that the thong song. First of all, noted that if I want to survive a deadly clown attack in the apocalypse, learn the thong song and have that memorized. Duly noted. I thought that was funny. I thought that the whole show thing was funny as hell. That he's nobody's lived through this show. I've never let anybody leave, and he asks John Doe after the first part of it what he thinks, and pretty much it turns out that he doesn't like that people just lie and say they like it
Yeah,
Yeah.
so they can leave. He wants honesty, and when Quiet just says it's fucking terrible, or it's
that was her first
it's
line.
fucking yeah,
I
it's
loved
fucking
it.
stupid. Like it's again, I loved Stephanie Beatrice in episode one, and I think that she's going to grow on me more and more as the show wears on. I think she's hysterical in Brooklyn Nine-Nine. And I think that she fits this character really, really well. Some of her lines have, I think, unintentionally almost been funny, and the line that she ends the episode on is even funnier. What is it? Oh, fucking eat my ass, or whatever she is. She yells at the deputy. It's hysterical, and I think that whereas John Doe kind of carried the first episode, I think there are comedical moments with her, like even just the simple act when you see that she's been captured by Sweet Tooth, the simple
Yeah.
act of her flashing the car keys up, the look on her face. No words need to be said for that moment to be funny
Yeah,
because John Doe's reaction kind of says it all. So, Kyle, you said you had something to add as well.
yeah. So originally, for people who played the Twisted Metal games, um, I know that the truck that Sweet Tooth drives, that's actually Sweet Tooth, because Sweet Tooth, in the games, his name is Needles.
Mhm.
And you find out why later. But if you pay attention, next to his bed is his insane asylum, like jacket that he wore, and it
Yes.
has M. Kane on the back. It shows his. So they didn't just mess it up and take the most popular character and they just gave him the wrong. I think that they know what they're doing, because when I saw that, I was like, okay, because he obviously calls himself Sweet Tooth. I'm guessing he has some sort of amnesia, or he, decided that he didn't want to go by Needles in this, because his name is obviously, you'll learn it later, but it's obviously M. Kane. But it's
Yeah.
interesting that he decided to go by Sweet Tooth in this, because in the games it was always the truck was Sweet Tooth and he was Needles. Um,
Yeah.
they also did a really good job, paying attention to small details, because I don't think this is really known by a lot of people, but the paper bag is canon.
It is.
Harold, that's
What the
actually,
hell is that?
dude, it's just a paper bag, and it whatever it has in it, whatever he needs at the time. You'll see later. It's dude,
It's it's bizarre. It's very bizarre.
it's
That's so
wild. But
wacky.
that's from the games. That was actually, if you read some of his bios, it says that his best friend is a paper bag.
And
I
it just has whatever he needs. That's
yeah, like,
crazy.
dude, it's the little attention to detail in this that I think I really enjoy. Especially with this being a video game adaptation, we're gonna critique it harsh if they are, just coming in and giving it the Walking Dead treatment, where they just completely, rip the source material out and put in whatever they want to put in. I'm glad to see that there are a lot of nods saying that, we didn't forget about this, or, this is, being portrayed in a good light. But yeah, I gotta say, Sweet Tooth really steals the show. in this episode
I
and
was
going
also
forward.
a fan of. I was a fan of how he called John Doe weird for his love being a car.
Yeah.
I thought
Yeah,
that was one where I had to pause the episode and I had to laugh a little bit at that. I will say, whereas the first episode didn't really win me over as somebody from the outside, I think the second episode does a great job of doing that exact thing. It does a really good job of being a little more entertaining, leaning in a little bit more to the comedy. There's the action early on that really works.
Yeah.
But the comedy ultimately, I feel like, is what sells this episode, is what makes this episode good. Now, we don't see a ton of Thomas Hayden Church in this episode. We don't see just a ton of him. He's only in it for a couple scenes.
yeah,
But I feel like his stuff is still super interesting, especially looking at how they train and initiate new recruits.
yeah,
I felt like that part was really interesting to watch. Watching them give these two guys sniper rifles.
yeah. Mike and Stu.
Yeah, Mike and Stu giving them sniper rifles and essentially telling them to watch. I can't remember the exact terminology they watched because, forgive me, I did a workout in between this and my brain is fried. But having them watch essentially a truck of goods and sniping anyone that touches it.
Yeah,
And I think that's the interesting, because I believe it was Stu that, Mike had no problem, from what I remember, shooting the
yeah.
people that were trying to loot it. But Stu, for some reason, was very hesitant, and I was interested that there was no real repercussions for that, or at least none that we've seen yet. At least none that I've seen yet. I mean, you guys are probably making those big ass faces of, oh, he doesn't know. Does he know?
Does he know?
That's what y'all are doing right now, because y'all have probably seen something in episode 5. Mark this down if I'm right. Episode 5 that happens that's like oh, that's this moment come full circle. But I really found it interesting that was really all we got, was just kind of the initiation of those two. And nothing else. I still think that it does a good job of showing how menacing Thomas Hayden Church could be. And Kyle, you said that a lot about him in episode 1.
Yeah.
I feel like it still does a good job of showing how menacing he can be, even if he's not in it a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, when, I think they called them seagulls, were the people that came by.
Survivors.
Yeah.
Survivors are called seagulls, yeah.
Because originally, they were like,
Yeah.
they took them out there and they said, we're going to be doing, we're going to be watching for seagulls. And, obviously Stu from the beginning had a weird feeling about it, because you saw he was like sweating. He was like, I don't know, I just don't feel good about this, man. And then it turns out that seagulls was just another term for survivors. But yeah, it also, I thought, did a good job of showing another faction, the Butchers, without having an entire episode about them. Because, like, just the first, 5 minutes was what had them in it, where we first meet Mike and Stu, where they're about to be eaten because they were guards for the Butchers, but then they ended up falling asleep on the job, and so we're introduced to them getting, marinated in, sauces and stuff, and they're joking about it. Dude, that was some dark humor. That was that, that dark humor that, the series is known for. But it was cool that they introduced, the Butchers without making a whole episode of it. It's just like, hey, these guys are out there, because I feel like we'll end up seeing them again later on, or maybe in later seasons, because with, like we keep saying, the little details, they always matter, and I don't think that they would have had that big of a scene without it meaning something later on.
Without there being a hint of, like, okay, this will come back to roost. I think that you're right. I think there's no reason to introduce a faction like that. Looking at you, Last of Us Part 2. If you're love that game, but my God, the Rattlers had no reason to be at the end of that game. But I think that there's no reason to introduce a faction like that if you're not going to do something with them later on. I feel like we were shown them for a reason. Again, you two are probably sitting there going, does he know? Because you've seen the entirety of the show at this point. But I am interested to see more, and especially because it does expand on the lore as well, that, it's the apocalypse. There's not just 2 factions out there. There's going to be dozens. There's several different factions. There's several different groups of people trying to survive. I feel like that's what a lot of apocalypse films, and especially games, a lot of them kind of get that wrong, is that in an apocalypse, there's going to be several groups of people that try to survive. There's not just going to be 2 warring factions in an entire country that
Yeah.
fight over resources. It's going to be a ton of small groups with maybe a couple bigger groups mixed in. So that's just my take is I like that they're introducing more, and I hope that they build on that more. Because again, I really like this episode. I think this episode's really, really good. Matt, the end of this episode, we leave off on another cliffhanger, and I'm not gonna lie, I held off on it because I had some work stuff I had to do, and then I needed to work out. The ending of this episode really had me wanting to click next episode immediately.
Oh yeah, no, they did the perfect setup for a cliffhanger that gets you to want to watch the next episode, which I'm really glad that they decided to upload all the episodes, because something that we forgot to mention was the fact that Quiet's brother was killed by
Yeah.
his name was
Agent Stone.
Agent Stone. Yeah, so they get to that checkpoint, and this
All
is
bad
where
guys' last names are Stone. I said it.
They really are. They really are. And they hit that checkpoint, John Doe and Quiet. After they leave Vegas, and Quiet sees Agent Stone, and she's like,
No, it was
this is
Agent
where
Stone's right-hand man.
our Agent Stone's
The
right hand man.
long-haired,
Yeah,
greasy dude.
exactly. Yeah,
Shepard, Agent Shepard, I think is his name.
Yeah.
Yeah. She sees him, immediately recognizes his face from where her brother got attacked by Agent Stone and his goons, and that immediately just like triggers this is like where her revenge story starts to begin, because this is going to go through a lot of the season, and this is also in a way the next thing for Stu and Mike to do is they're the ones going through this whole situation, and then but everything just turns really sour when she sees him and gets out to go after him. And John Doe, he's like, "Do not ruin this mission for me," like, you know what I mean? And he gets out, and then it just turns into this big thing, and then they're just left off getting tased, and they fall to the ground, and then that's it. Like they set it up to the point where it's like you definitely want to know what's going to happen next. So going to the next episode, I told myself I'm not going to watch every episode one after the other. When I watched the first episode, I just kind of left it there for the next day. When I watched like an episode the next day after that cliffhanger, I was like, okay, now they got me. I want to see what happens, because it was so sudden, especially going into, the lair, or one of them, of Agent Stone, who we know is not good at this point. We've seen enough of him to know. And, you just want to know what's going to happen to our main characters here. So they left it up, and they did a great job.
Yeah, I think that's a real strength of this show. I said it in our first episode review, which hopefully you've listened to at this point. I said that I think the 30-minute format was absolutely the right way to go. And I think on top of that, I think especially with the first two episodes ending off on cliffhangers, them releasing all 8 episodes at once, or all the episodes right at once, I think was the right call, because you're going to get a lot of people that binge it in one day, pretty much like Kyle did. You're going to get a lot of people that do that, but it's easy to binge because you're not talking about hour-long episodes. I loved The Last of Us on HBO. I thought it was fantastic from start to finish. Thought even my least favorite episodes were still 8 out of 10 episodes. And I think that the one thing I would have loved is for those episodes to have been available immediately. But the balancing of it was they're, an hour long. Some of them are even longer than that. And it's hard to binge that. I think that this is a very bingeable show because the humor is very good. The action's good when it's been there. And it's the storyline, you start to see it developing a little bit more. So you got to give your hats off to the production team and the creative behind it. The decision to go to 30-minute episodes was very smart. And I think that releasing all the episodes was even smart. Hopefully next week I'll find something else I can add to that to say about that as well. Again, y'all are sitting there for the third time. I'm going to strike out on this joke again. Y'all are sitting there going, does he know? Because y'all have seen it so far. But I think that this episode has me feeling a lot more confident about this show than episode 1 did. And I like that. I like that I'm a little bit more intrigued and I want to watch the next episode. Whereas after episode 1, I kind of said, okay, I watched it, I can review it, and I'll watch episode 2 when I get to it. Watching this one, as soon as we're done recording here, I'm probably going to go and try to watch the next 2 episodes. So I think that Twisted Metal episode 2, we can all agree, really builds on the first episode in some good ways. I'm intrigued to see where it goes from here. You guys have already seen it, of course. But I think that I'm very intrigued, again, as an outsider to this franchise. I'm very intrigued by where this is going to go. So that is going to wrap up this episode of Side Mission. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Side Mission Pod. You can follow us on Facebook as well at Side Mission Podcast. For the boys, for Kyle, for Matt, I'm Rusty. Thanks for listening.